Why are we still learning new information about Jeffrey Epstein? Lawmakers are pushing to release everything. Some are actually looking to suppress it. Wouldn't you know, Epstein associates are running everything these days. Do you want to know who they are? So do I. Let's do this. It's Friday, so why not grab a hold of a lightning rod and talk about what everyone is still wondering? Jeffrey Epstein, who, let's just say, probably didn't kill himself. But as I have said before, he is the first person to ever go to jail for trafficking children, minors, to apparently no one. Seriously, not one person who went to his island or partook in the trafficking of young girls has gone to jail. None. And it appears to be a very deliberate effort by a bunch of really powerful people to conceal who was on his plane, who was at his island, and even who was friends with him. Now, Epstein's real coverage started in 2006 after an investigation by the FBI claimed that he sexually abused more than 40 girls between the ages of 13 and 17. But more recent court filing and news reports and investigations have unearthed serious allegations and information that has not yet been covered and even garnered attempts by mainstream media to suppress or discredit it. Epstein was extremely politically connected, folks, even though there's no clear path to how he garnered all of his wealth and power. He just popped up one day and with a ton of money and influence. For whatever reason, there are actually some people in Washington who are crazy enough to block any transparency in this. I mean, the guy's dead. Now, Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn, who is on the right side of things, proposed subpoenaing Epstein's estate specifically for the flight logs to his plane, the Lolita Express.
I've been demanding some answers on Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and trying to get these flight records. I've offered amendments to a subpoena, trying to get that, and kind of been stonewalled on it. I think people need to know who was on those planes and how often they were on those planes.
Yeah, unfortunately, her efforts, though, were crushed by Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, who, alongside other Senate Democrats, blocked the initiative. Epstein's private jet was known for allegedly carrying some of the most important people in the world. It was also the jet that most frequently flew down to his private island, which everybody knows about, often accompanied by young women at the hand of Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, almost all of Epstein's guests were from highest ranks of society, celebrities, politicians, even members of the royal family. Which leads to the even greater question, what does Senator Dick Durbin have to hide? Sure, Republican lawmakers are asking the same question, but Senator Ted Cruz absolutely blew Durbin out of the water, claiming, quote, this is easy to resolve if there are politicians, Democrat or Republican or anybody else who is on that plane, who is going to that island, who was molesting and sexually assaulting children. We should know who they are. Yeah, he went on. The fact that the Democrats are apparently in full-on panic, I don't know if Dick Durbin knows somebody on that list, or I don't know if they're just afraid. I don't know what their fear is, but they're plainly terrified of voting on it. And if I'm wrong, Dick Durbin can solve it very easily by bringing it up for a vote and issuing the subpoena. Now, as usual, Senator Ted Cruz is actually right on the mark here. Thanks to recent posts from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, that list of Epstein associates is getting more and more attention, more and more exposure by the day. Most recently, presidential candidate Robert Kennedy, who admitted he was on the plane. He's out in the open about it. But Epstein's plane, as two flights juxtaposed, his admission stories and dates don't check out with the facts, thanks to the limited flight logs that were made available during Ghislaine Maxwell's case versus the USA. This is exactly why the American public wants to know what went on. And this man is running for president of the United States, folks. It's not like he's polling at zero either. He's polling higher than half of the Republican people behind Donald Trump. I am certainly not speculating, but imagine if there was a deeper connection. If he was more involved than just a plane ride. We deserve to know because the facts don't line up. But he's not the only one. William Burns, the former Deputy Secretary of State under Barack Obama, reportedly met with Epstein at his townhouse while he was working for the Obama administration. Whatever happened to William Burns? Well, Epstein reportedly had 3 scheduled meetings in 2014 with Burns, who at that point was the Deputy Secretary of State. He became the president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and then Biden made him the head of the CIA in 2021. Again, not somebody I want running an entire government agency if he did something wrong, especially if his ties to Epstein go any further than we already know. Lawrence Summers is another one. His relationship with Epstein is well reported on. He was once the Treasury Secretary and the president of none other than Harvard University. You see, Epstein became a convicted sex offender in 2008. He only served 18 months, though, in prison and another year in house arrest. And that sentencing was shockingly light. And I'm going to get to that in a sec. But after the conviction, obviously Harvard cut ties with the billionaire, even declining his annual donations. But for some reason, this didn't stop Summers. He was Harvard's president at the time from keeping in touch with Epstein. In fact, most reporting suggests that they regularly met and maintained an active relationship well into the 2010s. We all know Bill Gates had a very public relationship with Epstein for years. We kept asking about how Epstein came with so much power and influence. Bill Gates is one of the keys to answering that. The Wall Street Journal reported that Gates had an affair with a bridge player named Mila Anatova in early 2010, and that Epstein may have used leverage of his knowledge of that in the situation against the Microsoft co-founder. Even more, Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, and even Donald Trump flew on his plane. But here's the irony, is that this entire story blew up because Trump became president and then appointed Jim Acosta, who was the U.S. attorney in Florida who prosecuted Epstein and gave him that sweetheart deal. Now, he was then nominated and confirmed as a labor secretary. But when the investigation blew wide open on this, because obviously Democrats brought it out, it turned out that Trump was about the least involved person with Epstein of anyone. There was only one flight from Palm Beach to Newark, New Jersey. That was it. That was all they could find. Never visited the infamous island like so many Democrats that sought to use it to destroy Trump. Kind of funny how that whole thing worked out. And now those same people who rushed to tie Trump to Epstein are scrambling to keep everything else a secret. Look, I generally try to give some sort of solution or answer to the problem that I present every night, but this time I got nothing. My only logical conclusion is to tie the issues here on that client flight list and the flight logs and that little black book to the fact that it probably might destabilize some of the people and their platforms that have been preaching to us for years on how we should live our lives. But rest assured, folks, we'll keep digging. Seamus Bruner, the author of Control Oligarchs and director at the Research and Government Accountability Institute, and Vicky Ward, the founder of the Vicky Ward Investigates newsletter on Substack, who obviously has been following Jeffrey Epstein for probably close to 20 years now. Vicky, I'll go to you first on this. Did I miss anything? And is there any more clear answers than anything I discussed?
Unfortunately, no. And I do think that we do need answers about the men. You know, I sat through Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, and I wrote about how incredibly frustrating it was to see these flight logs with redactions of all these names of all these men. And at the end of the day, the only person who has paid a price for helping Jeffrey Epstein is Ghislaine Maxwell. And, you know, I have said again and again, where are the men? Jeffrey Epstein was enabled by an ecosystem of rich, powerful men. We need to know who they are. I do think, this goes to how our country is run. I actually find myself in an unusual position of agreeing with Ted Cruz. I think it's really important that we get to the bottom of this. I have looked into this for 20 years, and I still don't have all the answers.
Yeah, and that's crazy. After 20 years, you can't find the answers in that. But Seamus, you're also a bit immensely involved in investigating a number of things, including something like this. How is it that we have U.S. senators calling for something as simple as a flight log for somebody who's dead, and we can't even get those?
Yeah, God bless you, Carl, for covering this important issue. And I applaud Vicky for her work. And I applaud Senator Blackburn for calling for the flight logs. Here's the thing. The flight logs are circumstantial evidence at best. I can tell you where the Epstein client list is. It's with a bank called J.P. Morgan Chase. Just last month, a judge approved a $365 million settlement between J.P. Morgan Chase and the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And so what happened is a year ago, the victims of Jeffrey Epstein sued JP Morgan Chase because Jeffrey Epstein was a big client there. The victims say that JP Morgan Chase facilitated the transfers, human trafficking transfers. Well, JP Morgan Chase just agreed to pay $365 million to avoid going to trial. Here's the kicker. JP Morgan Chase has admitted to the Treasury Department that they did facilitate over $1 billion in human trafficking transfers. And guess what? You can't just transfer money to no one, and you can't receive money from no one. So JP Morgan Chase knows the clients. They know who transferred $1 billion to Jeffrey Epstein. Well, they can tell us who they are.
And Seamus, just because of the gravity of this, I haven't personally confirmed that, neither has the network. But I mean, there are obviously court records, and I've read a lot of these headlines to that. And to the point on that, Vicky, which is like I said it in the beginning of the monologue, he's trafficked children to no one.
Right. Well, you know, I will give a shout out to Senator Ron Wyden, who is asking for the tax returns and tax details of the billionaire Leon Black, who has stepped down from running Apollo, the private equity, because it came out that he had paid $100 million, more than $100 million, to Jeffrey Epstein for what he said was tax advice. And I think Congress is involved in at least trying to get to the bottom of that. And to what Seamus was just saying about JP Morgan, I think the other thing that's really fascinating about what came out in the discovery there, and I suspect JP Morgan was anxious to put a lid on it and not go to trial, was, how all the senior executives at the bank knew that there were red flags around Jeffrey Epstein and kept banking him anyway, because he was at the center of all these other very rich men who they thought they could get as clients. I mean, it's an extraordinary insight into how power really works.
Right. Well, Seamus, I want to give you the last 30 seconds here.
Yeah, sure. And I understand you have to verify that. It has been widely reported. The New York Times covered it. It's in the court documents. JP Morgan said, quote, human trafficking, end quote, transfers. And then they gave those records to the Treasury Department. And so the Treasury Department also knows who the clients are.
Yeah, I'm not doubting you. I just, for legal coverage here, I want to make sure.
I understand.
So
it's big news. That's where the client list is. It's big news.
Yeah, and like, look, I've read a lot of things on this. I've covered it very, very intensely, and I think that you guys are the perfect panel for this. So I appreciate you coming on and taking these big steps to try to expose something that should have been out, I don't know, Vicky, 20 years ago. So thank you, Seamus Bruner, Vicky Ward, appreciate it.